Whether you're at the base of your own personal Everest, navigating the twists and turns of your career, or simply seeking inspiration to keep climbing, join us as we embark on a shared expedition of growth, learning, and triumph, where every step forward is a victory and every story shared is a beacon of hope. I'm your host, David, and together, let's ascend to new heights. Welcome to the Climbing the Ladder podcast. We are episode 3 with Chad Finchum for the Climbing the Ladder podcast. For those of you that don't know Chad, he is a NASCAR driver and has been for a couple years now. Also, detailing is a hobby. So we're in your shop out here in Powell with quite the hardware behind us. So you want to give us a little info about all what's behind us, and we'll get into kind of the beginning and up to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Chad Finchum, 29 years old. Born and raised right here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and this is the shop where I currently reside out of with my detailing hobbies and whatnot. And then also, this is the shop that for many, many years we built all of our own race cars and didn't quite look this good. The floor wasn't done and the walls weren't as painted and we didn't have as good of lights. But all in all,
everything's got a starting point.
Everything's got a starting point, and the building that we're sitting in is the same building that we've been operating out of for 20, 30 years.
Does that give you sentimental value to that? I know you and your dad are really close, kind of building cars together.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, there was talks at one point a few years ago of expansion and getting another building. And I'm like, but we're keeping that building, right? We can't let it go.
I think you're kind of in a situation where me and Hope are in with cars they have. I know you've got a couple of Mustangs. Your dad's got the Corvette. I don't know what other cars he has, but the ZR1 sticks out for me. And we got the Shelby behind us. And you guys actually did a best of show for Ponies in the Smokies last year. Any plans to go this year? I think it's this weekend.
Yeah, definitely plans to go. Dad's, growing up, Dad was always into hot rods. Like, dude, I used to get picked up in school and old Fox body Mustangs, or if he had a Corvette, like, man, there was always something Camaro. And so growing up, naturally, I was into cars. And then the racing side of it, like him and my papaw, and the NASCAR fan side of it has ran in my family's genes for years. And, just growing up being around cars, like me and my dad just naturally shared that passion. And he's always been more of even though he's owned Mustangs, he's more of a diehard Chevrolet guy. And I love all.
Was that a little rivalry growing up?
Well,
it's like dad likes Chevrolet, I'm going to go Ford.
Maybe a little bit, but like in all reality, I like all cars, but I definitely like Mustangs are my favorite.
You want to give us a little rundown on the Shelby we got behind us right now?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing with this car. So I bought this car. I graduated high school in 2012. And my first full-time in NASCAR was a series called the NASCAR Wheeling Series, which if you think about like a high school ranking system, the Wheeling Series would be like almost like the freshman level, maybe borderline like an 8th grader. Okay. So NASCAR has about 4 to 5 levels. And in 2013 is when I went full time in that series. And at the end of that year, so like heading into that season, I had no plans of probably winning a race or the championship, but we won the first race and the championship in that season. And at the end of that year, I purchased this car, and it was all stock, and I'm the third owner of it. And I left it that way for many years. And as I climbed the ranks, I worked my way up into a series, what is now known as the ARCA series, but back then it was called the NASCAR K&N series. We won the spring race at Bristol. And so this car right now is pretty heavily modded. That's
the victory lane photo we put up on the preview for the episode. Yeah.
And so this car, like I said, it started out its life all original, and in my ownership, it's pretty heavily modded. I mean, the engine's all stock, but that's pretty much it. And after I won the Bristol race in 2016, that's when all the mods really started for me. So we went from 500 horsepower to 800. It's blower swap, all new suspension, all new brakes. And it's I basically built it to essentially copycat like what Ford produces out as like a Shelby Super Snake.
Yeah, and it looks just like it.
And that's essentially what I've copycatted. I was just too broke to afford an actual Super Snake. So I used what money I could have at the time available, and then pieced my own version of a Super Snake together.
Well, and we all know that something like this doesn't start out like that. It's not like I'm going to go racing and I'm going to buy a car. We got another car beside it that kind of gets you started into that world. And you were pretty young when this whole climb started. A lot of people realize that professional race car drivers are in their 20s, 30s, mid 30s is getting old for a race car driver.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm a big Formula One fan, as you know. I don't follow NASCAR as much as Formula One, but I'll compare this to, say, Lewis Hamilton is one of the best in the sport. He's been doing it 25 years. He's 40 years old. Like that makes me feel old. I just turned 36, so it's you got to get started pretty young, and you started pretty young at your when you started into circle track.
I did. I was starting out like nobody like just naturally thinks, okay, you're gonna be a NASCAR driver one day. Like, I was in elementary school, probably second, third grade, somewhere in that ballpark. And man, I was playing T-ball. I was running track. I was just
being a normal kid.
Yeah. And while I was having fun at that, like I knew even at that age, like I wasn't getting satisfied. Like I always wanted to bail out on whatever we were doing. And my dad, has always had golf cars. And, I ran, even before I started racing, I would always drive him golf cars around in our yard at our house. And I had like a mud spot wore out where I was driving around.
Made your own track.
Yeah. So like I wanted to get home from ball practice or track practice and just hop on that golf car. And so, you're talking, I'm probably at this point 6, 7 years old. We're probably talking 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere in that ballpark. And, families, diehard NASCAR fans, dad, papa. So like our typical Sunday routine growing up was go to church, get out of church, run through the KFC drive-through or whatever, get some chicken, go home, sit down, watch all the race. And that was our Sunday. And, one Sunday we're sitting there and dad's flipping through the paper and he sees an ad where there's a kid that's relatively close to the age that I was at the time, who had a go-kart similar to the one that I have here in the background and had some trophies with it, and they were running an ad that they were selling it. And I talked my dad into like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Simply because you just had that connection with NASCAR every time you got home. It was, oh, cool, I could actually do this.
Yeah. And so, my dad's like, oh, yeah, right. you're 6 years old. You don't know what
you don't know what you want to do. You want to be an astronaut.
But that's what I wanted to do. And so I don't know how all this came about, but I talked him into going to looking at it. We did. We purchased it, came home, tucked it away.
And that was a complete turnkey, ready to run, take it out next weekend, or did you have to do some stuff to it?
It was fairly turnkey. I mean, we had to do a few things to it, but we were a fan of NASCAR, but we didn't know. And we were he was mechanically inclined his whole life. Like I said, he was always into cars and he knew stuff about cars, but man, knowing stuff about cars and then knowing racing, there's a barrier. And my dad, we go and buy this go-kart and they sell it to us and they're like, it's race ready.
Yeah.
Just go. And so
sounds like a good sales pitch.
So we pick it up and I don't remember the exact timeline, but eventually we get it on a racetrack. We test it, I think 2 or 3 times. And
now when you say testing, is that just turn it on and do some laps and make sure the tires don't blow? Or is there you say you don't know much about it and there's it gets down to tire pressure and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, and we didn't know.
We
didn't know anything about tire pressure. We didn't know anything about different gear ratios. Nothing. I mean, talking about bare bones, knew nothing about it.
That almost sounds like Days of Thunder when Cole Trickle knows nothing about cars. He just gets in and drives it.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't know the exact timeline, but we find a local, we bought this thing not even knowing where we race it at. I mean, there could have been tracks not even around here.
I mean, you got a yard, right?
We wouldn't have known. We're like, do we take this up to NASCAR Speed Park?
go out to Pigeon Forge.
So, obviously my parents had a huge role in navigating and sourcing who to go see and where do we race this at.
Did they have connections for that? Or was now we got the car, now we just got to figure it out?
There was no connection.
Yeah.
I mean, it was strictly just, we bought a car and then that 10% of information that you got from the guy selling it is all we had to hang on to. And then of course we could call him if we had questions. And that's how it started. And then eventually we wind up at a racetrack and it's on a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. And I don't know what dad paid, probably $50, $60. And we ran 2 hours of practice at a dirt track in Sevierville. It's closed down now, but it was called Dumpling Valley Raceway. And man, I started there, and we ran like 2 hours of practice that night. And we ran really good. And like the track owner was like pretty impressed. He was like, "Are you sure
for never doing it before?"
Yeah. He was like, you sure y'all have never done this before?" And we're like, "We're promise. We're like, we don't know what we're doing." And he was like, "Well, we got this big race coming up in like a couple weeks. You all should come up and compete in it." And we're like, "Yeah, he's just trying to get our money."
Yeah.
So I think we go practice maybe 1 or 2 more times. And then we entered in that race he was talking about. And we somehow won this race. I think
so. As a 6 or 7 year old, what does that feel like? You're now qualifying or on the grid with all these other racers that probably have 4 years experience. They race since they were 3 or 4 years old. What does that feel like as a 7-year-old?
Man, I'll be honest.
Or like, hey, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna get to do this. Video games, no concern of getting injured. You're invincible.
I don't know that I recall a lot about the moments leading up to that or even after.
It's one of those, you guys won. That's kind of all that
like
sticks.
The biggest thing that stuck, like I couldn't even tell you who competed in that race. I couldn't tell you where we qualified. I couldn't tell you if there was cautions, if we got in a wreck, if we went the whole race green. Like the bits and pieces of the story are minimal.
Even with bits and pieces of memories, that sounds like NASCAR racing. Nobody cares who qualified first. All anybody cares about is who finished.
I know for a fact we won the race. I remember for a fact that the trophy was blue.
Yeah. And we were talking about that earlier as we were looking through these. You're like, "Where's your first trophy?" And it took you a minute to find it. And I don't know if you were sure or not.
Yeah. It says 2002 on it, which lines up probably with about where we're at. And I remember it's blue and that one's blue. So, but man, like I remember definitely like we had a little open flat trailer, just like a lawn trailer and just a regular like Chevy pickup truck. And man, I remember like as a kid, race is over, we go through all the pictures and everything, and I'll hop in the back seat of the truck. At this point in time, you're talking, it's probably near midnight.
On a school night, or is it middle of the summer?
No, it's the middle of the summer. This is most definitely like a weekend adventure. But like I remember climbing to the back of Dad's truck, grabbing like a drink, a blanket, and then like cuddling up with my trophy like I won this. So that's what I do remember, and like that's always stuck with me.
Is that kind of what kicked off this whole thing, or did you already decide that when you guys got the cart? Or it's like, I could be good at this?
Well, at first, racing, like we didn't know what we were doing, so we were just getting our feet wet to begin with. And honestly, like I was still involved with school sports at the time. And I remained in school sports for a few, like probably at least another year after. But like at first it was just another hobby that we were getting into to see if we liked it, see if we could afford it. We had no idea like even what this costed.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of things that people don't realize on TV, that they know it's expensive, but they really don't know how expensive racing is.
Exactly. And we didn't know really even for many years.
Well, you were going into it as fans.
Yeah, exactly. We were. And so, it was to take place of just like ball sports, and it did eventually take
kind of like
full place
something to do when school's out for the summer sort of thing. Yeah.
And dude, we enjoyed it so much. I loved it. That's all I could think about. Like, as I remember waking up as a kid and like knowing that it was a weekend, I would run into my parents' room like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning being like, "Are we racing this weekend?" And Dad's like, "No, we got this weekend off.
It's Christmas every weekend."
Yeah. Like it was Christmas every weekend. And man, it consumed us. Like racing no longer was like something we did. It was who we were. And like, you fast forward a few years and we're deep in it. Like we've got.
So we were kind of talking about earlier before we started this, is by the time you were 13, you had not 1 or 2 or a couple wins. You had a couple hundred wins under your belt.
Well, and we rate like, so, and a lot of people don't realize this, but racing is year round. You just have to find the series that is hosting the races.
Good for your schedule as well, or your parents' schedule at this point.
If you want to race every weekend, you can.
Yeah.
Like, there's indoor tracks. I've ran them. There's tracks that you can run to in the South, and even up north and here in Tennessee. Like, it don't matter how cold it gets.
Well, even the public, me and Clint, we like K1 Speed. We do a lot in Las Vegas. They have internet or nationals tracks all over the country, and you can enter into their weekend race program, and they keep your points throughout the whole country. So you could run a race every day and just accumulate points, and you make the championship.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah,
that is neat.
And are they getting one in Knoxville?
Yeah,
we got a K1 speed that's coming in summer 2024.
Yeah,
so we'll have one local, but they have.
I'll go try that out.
They're building their own racetrack for their K1 circuit. So the top drivers that do regional races all get to do a custom championship to race real cars on their track.
And I think the internet and streaming and everything, and even sim racing now that's huge, is kind of blowing the sport up at every level. Road courses, circle track, dirt racing. I'm not from Tennessee, as a lot of people know from episode 1. And when I first moved here, I went to my first circle track dirt race in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, that's nothing. That's nothing at home. I would have never thought that was a thing. I go home and I'm covered in soot and dirt, and I was like, I could do that again.
Welcome to racing. Yeah. I mean, that was our welcoming moment when I started, because and people may not know this, but like the go-kart set behind me, and I didn't even say this, but the go-kart tracks that I started racing on were dirt.
Yeah.
You know, they're not paved. This style of go-kart, they run on paved, but there's no paved tracks, or at least then none around us. It was all dirt. And so, like I was on dirt. Like my first probably 6, almost 7 years in racing was dirt racing. So
what do you like better?
Definitely asphalt now. The driving wise, to me, it's not the same. Like it obviously requires a whole different skill set, but the competition part is what's fun to me. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be on dirt, or it doesn't necessarily have to be on asphalt. It doesn't even have to be a race car. Like, dude, you could say, hey, I got 2 shopping carts out here. Like, do you want to see which one's faster?
It seems like a lot of racers are like that. Like, I'll foot race you. Like,
it doesn't
just part
matter.
of the
I'll
thing.
race anything. You know, we can roll pins around in the shop floor. I'm gonna try and roll my pin faster. And like, so to me, the competition is what makes it fun.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, obviously you're driving a race car, so that's
there comes to a point in this progression where it's like, this is something I need to take seriously. When does that happen? Like, when do you stop being a kid having fun and be like, this is something I could do for a living?
So as a kid, you know, I mean, I don't know. I just, you know, after I won my first race, I'm like, Dale Jr. better look out. I mean, so to be fair, just as a kid, I was like, oh yeah, we're making it to NASCAR.
Yeah.
We're going to be rookie of the year. We're going to win every championship every year. I'm going to go undefeated. That was the mindset. And then, you know,
and I think honestly, that's still the mindset of professional racers now. When the season starts, it's like nobody's beating me.
Yeah. And so, you know, as we get on down the timeline, we get a couple years under us, and I'm older. I've been around the sport. My parents have been around the sport now, and we have like what I would consider to be like a good base understanding of what's going on. And
that's kind of a gift and a curse, because we had this conversation when we were our shop sponsored you at Bristol in a couple years, and we sat and talked the political side of racing.
Oh yeah,
and it's money and who you know is a big thing once you get up into the TV series.
Yeah, once you on that note, once you get from your local racing and you start getting into more of what, like, you know, you're
doing it for a job.
Once you start doing your touring series where you're actually on a circuit, there's a lot of behind the scenes that,
and I don't know what you can get into as far as rules or what's politically correct as a race car driver, but I kind of want to dive into that as for a fan standpoint, because they don't understand. Like, a lot of people, just like baseball, just like football, everybody plays it growing up. So when they see it on TV, you'd be like, I could do that. I could be down there with those guys. And like, they really just don't know the extra level that professional athletes are at, even when racing. Like, you don't understand the physical fitness that you guys have to be in.
It's pretty crazy. And, you know, like when I was a kid doing it, running these carts, I mean, obviously I didn't work out, but like,
kids have energy. You don't have to worry about doing anything.
Tons of energy. And dude, I was always doing something. Like, Dad would be in this shop working on the go-kart. It would be like 9:00 at night. And there would, you know, we're talking 2 or 3 years into the sport. So we have other friends by this point that are also into racing. They would bring their stuff here sometimes, and we would kind of all work on it together. The dads would let the kids play while the dads worked. And dude, we and the kid would be freaking out here in a golf car running circles around each other in the parking lot while dads are in here working. And, you know, so that was my childhood on the weekends and the weeknights. And, you know, like, but probably 2 or 3 years in is when we started really traveling. Like at first, like I would say the furthest track that we went out to may have been Kentucky, or
and I would consider that kind of like a local track, kind of like your region. You're touching states basically.
You're talking, you know, 2 hours is probably the max that we traveled.
It's kind of like a baseball travel ball or high school baseball or anything like that.
And so like the 2 hours is probably max for my first few seasons, but we had a lot of success in those first few seasons and kind of got pretty established as like when we show up to the racetrack,
you're the one to beat.
We're a threat to win every week. And so then like we started like hearing, you know, like, oh, you should go run in this series, or you should run in that series, or you should come over to this track and this guy's really good. I think you'd be a good match for him. And so that's, you know, probably I'd say year 3 is when we started touring at the go-kart level.
And there's no set level to go. Like if you want to get to NASCAR, there's no like, we got to go here, then we got to go here, then we got to go here. It's kind of, you just need to win everywhere and kind of get noticed.
That's true. So your typical ball sports, you know, football, you've got, you know, high school, college, draft, NFL.
Yep.
There is absolutely no proving ladder anywhere in racing that you can go to.
As far as a NASCAR Xfinity race, could an outsider, is it like bigger sports where you need racing licenses to enter, or can you have a car to bring, you can qualify, and you're in the race? Assuming you had the money to do all that, and we'll probably get into that.
When you get up into your national touring series, NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, Truck Series, ARCA, stuff like that, you're going to have a resume of racing.
To show that you know how to be on track.
And I don't remember all the specifics, but when I got into it, you know, my first ever big national tour race was probably 2013, 14-ish, maybe that somewhere in that time frame. I mean, you had to have 2 years of asphalt experience in a stock car, which late models are still stock cars. Yeah. And that's where you had to show them like you've been doing this a little bit. It's
more so for a safety thing with other, like if you that's if you're 3 seconds behind the pace or something like that, you're going to cause a serious accident.
NASCAR actually there is a rule in our sport where if you can't make minimum speed, they penalize you and pull you off the track, and you're not allowed to compete that day. Yeah. And that goes for.
I mean, that's just like people driving the minimum speed limit on the interstate. You drive 45 and a 70. That's an issue.
It is. if you got a pack of 15 or 20 cars,
and
it's all pacing.
Add into that, no headlights, no brake lights. That's just.
Yeah, I mean, you got a pack of 15, 20 cars. We're all pacing at, you know, a strong pace, probably 160, 170 mile an hour, depending on what track you're at, maybe upwards of 200. I mean, and then you got a random car that's, you know, 15 mile an hour off the pace. Like, they are a hazard.
That's a big gap too at 200 miles an hour. 15 miles an hour is a big gap.
1 mile an hour is a big gap. But yeah. I mean, and that's why, like, if you get into an accident, you come down pit road and you repair your damages and you say you're good to go, and you go out there. If you can't make minimum speed, NASCAR parks you because they're like, dude, you can't be this slow. Like, you're gonna get somebody hurt. And it's true. Like, that's.
You've had a couple big wrecks in your day. I think the first time that we met, I was actually watching highlights with my son. I think I sent you the screenshot, and you were rear end. I don't remember what track it was, but you had a pretty bad rear end collision.
Yeah, and that's actually not that, you know, wrecks are good, but that's actually what led my career to where I'm at today, is because the last year that I was full-time kart racing was 2006, and we were at an event in Carnesville, Georgia, and it was called the Thanksgiving Thunder. It was arguably, outside of maybe the Daytona Speed Weeks, Kart Week, it was arguably probably the second largest event in the country. And it was one of those races where every single driver is showing up to absolutely win this race. Yeah. And so we show up down there, and we weren't that good in practice, qualified mediocre. I think there was 30, 35 karts in our class. And we qualified probably like 19th. And I'd worked my way up to like 5th. And with just a couple laps to go, they wrecked in front of us. And I was in a bad spot. Like, They spun the leader off of 2. Everybody in front of me was on the brake pedal. We're nose to tail. I'm on the brake, and I was the last car in line on the brake. Everybody behind me was still on the gas, and it kind of picked the go-kart up when dirt track. When the nose bit into the clay, it stopped, turned me around, and then I just got hit by every single person coming down that backstretch. And it was a horrific wreck. Like, I don't have that go-kart anymore, but it split where my feet operate the pedals. It split the frame off right there. And like, there was a go-kart that went over me and like pinned me down into the seat. Like, I had a broke nose.
And listeners that don't understand kart racing, these aren't like you go to your fair and it's 10 or 15 miles an hour. These karts are moving.
Yes. I mean,
these are like highway speeds or more.
Back then, we didn't have the technology we have now, so I didn't really know. But like, we got GPSs on our stuff now with our tacks, and you know, we're like, tracks around here, like we're touching low 60s in these things. And I mean, you're doing that as a kid too. I mean, you have restrictor plates on them as a kid. Depending on how old you are, they'll bracket you off to a smaller restrictor plate. But I mean, like, the slowest class is probably still going to run in the 30s, and then you're just going to gradually go up from there, you know. And it was a bad wreck. And I just remember like, I think I got knocked out, and then one of the track officials like pulled me out of the go-kart or whatever. They stopped the whole race, and we were like, I had gotten back in the ambulance, whatever. I was fine, but my mom was like, "We're done. This is it.
Takes one, yeah.
This is it. We had a good run at it. It's over." And like it, and you know, you're talking Thanksgiving, so you know you're to the end of the season. Like that was probably the finale. And so, you know, you probably had 2 or 3 months to ponder on what you was going to do. And like, I didn't want to quit. Like, that didn't stop me. That just stopped her.
Yeah.
And so,
well, even now, you're always going to be her son.
And so there was a mutual decision in the family, like, okay, you can continue racing, but it's going to be something with seatbelts and a roll cage. Because like, what a lot of people don't know is these go-karts, they don't have seatbelts, no roll cage, nothing. So, okay. So, you know, we made that agreement, and then that was 06.
Sounds like one of those situations where, okay, you can continue racing, but we're going to go faster.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, you're talking, this was probably end of 06, and now you're starting to get into the territory of 07, 08, and I got into a series that was on asphalt, and that was my first adventure into asphalt. Up to this point, it had been nothing but dirt.
And is that, as far as driving style, completely different? Is that a big change when you're that basically that young? I wouldn't say young. It was. I mean, it's a couple years ago, but
I would say it is way different to an extent. I kind of had, like, when you're talking about kart dirt racing, you're not really, like, you think of dirt racing, you look at these like sprint cars or these, you know, super late models, and they're carrying tires, the left front and they're sliding, basically drifting through the corners. You know, that's not really how kart racing is. Kart racing, with the speed that you're running on the size of the tracks you're running them on, the dirt is a prepped dirt. Like the track owners,
it's almost as hard as asphalt.
Yeah, it's hard. It's packed down, and then they allow you to soak your tires in chemicals to make the rubber compound softer, so you're gripping up. A dirt go-kart, to an extent, will drive probably more like a asphalt car than a dirt car, with the exception of, like, you get on a dry slick track and you are just whipping that thing. But so the transition, I mean, there was a transition, but like, it isn't as large as what it may sound. And then you know, in 07, man, we were full blown asphalt racing in a series called Bandoleros, and you know, I ran those for a few years. We won a lot of races in those. In 08, we were the national champion, and that wreck in 06 in that go-kart at Carnesville, Georgia, that pivoted my career into, okay, we're going to get into something else. And then that led me
it did well for you more safety features mean there has to be more space for those safety features, which ultimately means a car instead of a cart.
Yeah. Honestly, if I hadn't had that wreck, Mom hadn't cracked down on us about running the go-karts anymore, man, I may have never been a NASCAR driver. You know what I mean? Like, that one wreck. And that's just, you know, I'm a believer in faith in God, and I think that moment was the way of paving the path.
A lot of athletes that have made it to the high levels, not necessarily the highest level, but even just like only have baseball to compare to because that's what I went through. But even the minor leagues, there's always that one spot in your mind where you be like, that moment shifted your path to where you are now. If that moment didn't happen, you don't know what you were doing. And every athlete has that.
And it's not like, okay, because I wrecked right then, I was going to be a NASCAR driver. There was many moments like that, but that was the first of a series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of opened your mom's eyes a little bit for a really bad wreck.
Yeah. I mean, racing in general is dangerous.
It's one of those it won't happen to me type mindsets, and then it does, and it's just like, we got to think about this now.
Yeah. And, I mean, every driver has, I don't care how good you are, you've had some nasty wrecks in your career. And I have had my fair share of nasty wrecks.
You're not pushing the limit if you're not
exactly.
wrecking.
Exactly. So
you can't know to drive on the limit if you can't find it.
Yeah. So luckily, for the most part, I've just broke a couple bones and walked away. So I'm a lot more fortunate than many people have been that has competed.
So where are we now? You're in your first true asphalt circle track. Where are we now on that kind of timeline of in your racing career? Is this like 15, 16, 17, high school? Where are we at here?
So, in 07 is when I went into asphalt in the Bandolero series. Bandoleros are ran under an umbrella called the NX series. They fielded a Bandolero car and a Legends car. Legends, I think you had to be at least, it was like 13 or 14 to drive them. I think it was 14, but I could be wrong. So when I got into Bandoleros, I was like 1 or 2 years just shy of getting into these things. And so we're like, all right, we'll run Bandoleros, get you used to asphalt, then we'll jump into the Legends cars. And so in that series, there was you could run them a lot of different places, but like the hub for them is what I'll call it. It was at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we competed in a series called the Summer Shootout. It was a 10 race series that took place on the front stretch at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we would run the quarter mile. So we would come down the front stretch in that first asphalt opening in the grass infield. We would cut down that, run backwards down pit road, and then there was another asphalt cut through in the grass infield, and that was our turn 3 and 4 coming back to the start finish line. So we ran a 10 race series there through the summer, and that's really what was the staple in that series.
What size are the engines in these cars?
So go-karts, we started out with just a single piston like Briggs motor, and those made roughly, we'll say, about 10 horsepower, 10, maybe 11 if you're lucky. So now we're in a dual piston Briggs motor that you're probably talking, you're making 40, 45, somewhere in that ballpark. And, your average go-kart, which is what I started on, it's going to weigh probably 300 pounds with driver in it. The Bandolero cars, I think, were probably somewhere in a ballpark of 5 to 650. So, and that was the first car I drove that had suspension. It was kind of an odd setup. It had rear coilovers, but the front was all go-kart suspension. Huh. Very interesting setup. So you had like a little bit of roll in the rear, but then the front end was just pure stiff. So it took a little bit getting used to that, but we had a lot of success in those cars. And being in that series, so that's where I would say we met a lot of the contacts that stuck with us for years that catapulted me down the road. We come back to those contacts, because you're running at Charlotte Motor Speedway. A lot of the current NASCAR drivers had that are active now, like your Ryan Blaney's, your Chase Elliott's, Bubba Wallace. Okay, I was competing against all those guys in this series at probably 10 years old, 11 years old. And so you're getting to meet their dad. They had sponsors. They had people working on their cars. You're hanging out in the garage. You're mingling with these people. Like, you get to know them. They're your friends.
Yeah.
And so those contacts carried with us from that moment forward. And that's that was a huge turning point in the career.
Yeah, that's another thing we want to get into is a lot of people see basic running order you see on TV now, you'll have all the big names up front in the top 10, top 15. A lot of people don't realize what it really takes to get up into that part of the field. Be like, oh, this guy's running 35th. He's awful. And it's not necessarily the driver. A lot of the times it's money that the team has, the equipment they have. Like a lot of those big name drivers will have full race teams, full sponsorships, full engine builders. And it's completely different from the back of the field.
That's true. And a good example is there is a series right now that is it's a go-kart platform, kind of like what's behind us. It's roll caged with a full containment seat like what we run in NASCAR. And that's what, like when I was coming up through the ranks, the Bandoleros and Legend cars was kind of like the go-to series to put your kid on the map, especially running in that summer shootout. Now I would say it's that series that I'm talking about, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's almost like a go-kart / sprint car. Just it's kind of got like a go-kart chassis, roll cage, full containment seat, has wings on it. They look like a sprint car. And they run at a track in North Carolina called Millbridge. They run it all over, but Millbridge is kind of like the hot spot. And so like Kyle Busch's son runs in it, Kevin Harvick's son runs in it, Kyle Larson's son runs in it. Like tons of NASCAR drivers, their sons, their daughters, they're competing in this. So it was funny. There's one of our neighbors, his son's competing in that series. So he was telling us the story where they show up, they got their dually, they're enclosed, they got their little go-kart, and they're going to race. He said they pull in, and it's Stacker Renegade motorhomes. And I didn't even know this.
$1 million setups.
$1 million setups to run go-karts. And they were saying that like some of the NASCAR drivers were bringing like Mercedes Sprinter vans that were gutted that had like almost like a data center with laptops, computers, and satellites. And
technology.
They are paying engineers on payroll to sit down and watch this go-kart go around this track. The kid comes off the track, dad goes there, greets the kid, whatever. They bring the cart back to the truck, and then the engineers already know exactly what to do to the go-kart, and they do it. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like you're talking about like when I was running, different time, like technology's come a long way. Like there was no such thing as, iPhones and YouTube. And when I was growing up, you kind of learned by trial and error and who you met.
You tested the car.
Yeah. And now like everything, and that's something we'll get into in a little bit, but like the data side of racing has just like transformed what it used to be. And technology. And even at that level, it's there. It's there.
Which kind of blows my mind when you think about it, because we've never experienced that, and I'm sure even fans have. Racers would that know what they're doing. Technology these days, even just simple internet searches and YouTube videos, you can learn anything on the internet now.
Anything.
That's if you have a full team of engineers to fix your go-kart at 13 or 16 years old.
You're probably going to win. You're probably going to win unless you're going up against a field.
It's one of those, the biggest wallet kind of wins at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And so like, and that's what you're competing against. Now, even though the data wasn't really around when I was coming up like it is today, we were still, when we got into this summer shootout series, we also ran a series in that same timeline down at Atlanta Motor Speedway called the Thursday Thunder, right? So the Charlotte races were ran, both of these were summer series. Charlotte was ran on Tuesday. So you'd practice on Monday, race on Tuesday. We would travel Wednesdays, and then we would practice Wednesday night at Atlanta and then race at Atlanta on Thursday. So Monday through basically Friday, we were on the road. So in like, just put that in perspective, in 2008, I think we competed in probably something like 52 races, 52, 56, something like that. And we did all of that within probably, you're talking February to maybe Thanksgiving.
That's a lot of racing in that short amount of time.
Lots.
You think 52 weeks in a year, you're doing more than that in races in less time. Yeah. That's a lot.
And in that year, I mean, that was a huge year for me. We won 8 of the 10 at the summer shootout. We won No, we won 9 of the 10 at the summer shootout. We won 8 of the 10 at the Thursday Thunder, and the whole season, I think we ended up probably somewhere in the ballpark of 40 some odd wins to almost like 60 events. So I mean, we had like a really good win percentage that year, and like that's almost unheard of in racing. And so, and that was my final year in Bandoleros, which was 08, and then 09 rolls around. I'm old enough to get in this legend car. All right, so same deal. We buy the legend car, sell the Bandolero. We have, at this point, probably close to 8 to 10 years of racing experience under mine and my parents' belt. But we don't know what we're doing. Like every time you move up to a new series, it's
all different.
It completely defaulted. So the legend cars were open wheel. They ran 1250cc bike motors. And they were just absolute animals, like tons of power, and the cars were light. I can't remember how much they weighed. I'm wanting to say it was somewhere around 1,000 pounds.
That's pretty much a bike.
I'm wanting to say it was close to 1,000 pounds. We ran on a Bridgestone, I think it was Bridgestone tire, treaded. It wasn't a slick. It was a radial. I mean, you had to feather the gas, like it would just blow the tires off. And like that was my first time ever driving a manual. That was my first time ever driving something where I had to modulate the throttle. Like,
did you know how to drive a manual at this point, or was it just kind of you got in the car and had to learn?
Oh yeah, I knew how to drive because Dad always being in the heat and air business and with his cars, but he had a Toyota forklift. This thing was probably from like the 60s or 70s, but it was a manual. And I used to race it around in our little parking lot. So, I mean, I knew how to drive manual like way early on. But
well, I'm sure at this point, too, kids into racing at this point know how to drive just about everything with wheels.
And, so this was my first high horsepower car where, and also you open wheel. So it was totally different anything I've ever raced because like coming up through the ranks at this point, we're contained. Our wheels are contained. So when you get in a corner, you can lean on somebody, you can push them up, you can rub. Legend cars, you ain't doing that. You're wheel hopping, you're flipping, so it was a different style of driving. It was the first series where I had to learn how to modulate throttle on corner exit, because if I just committed to the throttle, I was going to spin out. Yeah. So it taught me it was probably the biggest learning curve that I had up to my career at that point.
The closest to actual car racing that you're going to get.
It was probably the closest.
What you have been doing in the past.
Yeah. And so I got into those cars in the beginning of 09, ran those for 2 years, 09 to 10. 09 and 10. And man, there was some big races we competed in. There was the biggest one I ever competed in was a race called the $1 million. It was the $1 million race or something like that, and it was $1 million purse. Winner got $250,000. I had never raced for that kind of money, and you're talking about 2000. This was in 2009 or 10, maybe in the end of 9. And I'm at this point I've got to be probably 14 years old. 15 years old.
It's a lot of money
we're competing for $250,000.
Yeah.
So anyways, we show up to Charlotte Motor Speedway for this event. This is the first like televised, like Speed's there back when Speed was around. They're there. They're televising the whole event. You got every single person, like David Reagan ran that race. Daniel Hemrick, current NASCAR driver. I think it was Ty Dillon, current NASCAR driver, like Bubba Wallace, tons of people that are current NASCAR drivers racing in this event. There was over 300 cars that showed up for this event, and they only took, I think, 30 or maybe 35 for the feature, for the final feature. So, and I think it was like a 3 or 4 day event. So we go down there, and I don't remember the whole process, but we get down there and we're fast. We're like 7th on the board after like a couple rounds of practice. We're like, we have a real shot at this. So we, and I don't remember how they qualified us, but anyways, we qualified. We was first in our heat race, and we won their heat race. We got like almost $11,000 for winning the heat race. Still, that was the most money I'd ever won up to this point. And we get through that race and we make it to the main. We started, I think, either 5th or 7th in the main. And at this point, you're down to the final 30, and they started with 300. We ran pretty good in that race, ended up getting in a wreck and not finishing. But that was an experience. That was my wake-up call to, like, you're on TV, you're surrounded by celebrities.
This could be something permanent and
this is
long-lasting.
Big time.
Yeah.
This is big time. Like, you roll in, and, like, just to put things in perspective, like, up to this point in my career, you roll in, a dually and an enclosed was like, okay, they're serious.
Yeah.
You don't come to a dually and an enclosed to these events. You know what I mean? And that's what we were doing. And we're pulling up
and winning.
And we're pulling up against stacker trailers, motor homes. And it's like, wow.
Basically, everybody, if they're still supporting their kids, they have dedicated their life away from work to their kids' racing career.
Yes, 100%.
It's an investment at this point.
Yes. And so, we get through that race, and, like, even though we didn't win, like, as a driver, you're like, dang it. But, dude, I'm telling you, like, I was still proud of myself, even at that age. Like, I was like, man, I can't believe we just did what we did. We didn't win, but, and then, I ran one more year in those cars. And then, in 2010, we kind of made the decision, like, I think we're ready for stock car racing. And then that's when we sold everything up to this point, and we bought a NASCAR late model. It was actually, we ran in a series called the ASA series, and it was a limited late model, which what makes the difference between a limited late model and a regular late model is chassis the same, body's the same. We ran crate motors instead of built motors. And at that time in the ASA series, instead of running like a 10 wide slick, we ran an 8 wide grooved tire. So that was kind of the differences. And so that's what I started doing in 2011. And I did those for a few years. My first ever race in those was actually at Newport Speedway. And then I traveled around doing that. And then in 2013, we met people along the way. And the people that
there's always that helping step, or
exactly.
In every story, everybody's like, oh, I did this myself.
No,
you didn't. You might have had that progression, but there's always somebody that gives you an opportunity.
Well, so like the thing about it is, like, there's no proven ground, like I said before, like there is on ball sports.
Yeah.
So even being in the sport this long, we're still like, where do we go? Because what a lot of people don't realize is there are so many different ladders you can climb in racing. You can go dirt, you can go asphalt, and that's just that's just simplifying it, because inside of asphalt, man, you've got probably 20, 30 different series you compete in, different types of cars. Same way with dirt.
Well, it's very similar. It's just like drag racing. There's a bunch of different classes. You have pro stock, top fuel. There's a bunch of different levels. Yeah.
When we got into late model racing, we didn't know what to buy. We had people telling us, you need to buy a super late model. You need to buy, no, you need to buy a late model stock. No, you need to buy a limited late model. Get into the ASA series, get into the UARE series. Dude, you're just sitting back. And at this point, I'm old enough to where me and my parents are starting to make decisions together. And we are just trying to figure out, like, this is what we're going to do. And we hope that it's the best decision. So we bought the limited late model, started running there, and had some success with that. And then, fast forward, you meet people along the way, and just kind of listening to what people are saying, and then taking that information and making your own decisions based on the information at hand. And I wound up we bought a late model stock car to compete in the NASCAR Wheeling Series in 2013. And that was my first time in NASCAR. And we won the first race out in that, which was not expected.
I was going to say, that's going to be a big eye opener at that.
I'm telling you, that was not expected.
Especially when your knowledge of the series you're racing in resets every year. Every year you change a car or a chassis or anything like that.
Because this is my first year in late model stock. So I'm coming out of a limited car, which is a 602, 603 Chevy crate motor with an 8 wide groove tire. Now I'm in a full built motor. I'm 10 wide slick, and like this, it's full time, it's big time. And so we show up to our first race. There's like 30 cars. I don't know what the expectation is. I mean, I'm just, as a driver, like, I just want to win.
Yeah.
I knew that probably wasn't going to happen. And I think we qualified like 11th and out of 30. So I was like, okay, we're a little above average here. I'll take that. And the green flag drops and I don't do nothing. I'm just pacing and I'm like, man, it'd be nice to pass these guys. And then, like, as the race progressed, I was like, okay, we got a spot here, spot there, started picking them off. And man, there was like 5 laps to go and we're sitting like second or third. And I'm like, I think I have a shot at this. And I think we had a caution that came out or something. And we took the green flag, and I don't know how it happened, but somehow I ended up winning that race. So I get out of the car, man, and I'm like floored, because I'm like, there is no way I just won my first ever NASCAR race. And that was a special moment. And then that season was tough. We went on that season to win.
So one of those, you hit the highest point the first race of the
highest
year, and
point,
now it's just like...
Because at that point, you show up to your next event, and you have this expectation, like, we're going to win this. We show up to the next event, we suck. Then we show up to the next one, we suck again. And, like, it was to the point where it was like, we get halfway through the season, and I'm like, maybe we were just lucky. You know, I was like, man, this is kind of heartbreaking.
I mean, that plays a big part in racing, too.
Yeah.
It comes with an opportunity.
Yeah. And so we get through the majority of that season, and I ended up winning a few more. I think we had a total of like 7 wins that year, 6 or 7, and we won the championship. It was enough. We have, even though we sucked early, like, we won, and then we went on like a stretch. So to put it in perspective, that season was probably about 20 races. So for that, like, first probably 10 to 12 race stretch, I mean, it was like, I couldn't find victory lane to save my life. Like, my best finish up to that point may have been like 4th or 5th, which was still good. But like, when you win your first one and then the best you can get's like 5th, and then you're averaging like 8th to 10th, that's not where I wanted to be. And so, just more practice, put in more work. Everybody kept grinding. We would go up a couple days every week. We would go up a couple days before the event. We would practice and put in work, and we got really good at the end of the year. And the final like 4 or 5 race stretch, man, we won almost every one of them. The very last race of the year, we broke the track record in qualifying and won the race and secured the championship. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And make a long story short, I competed in that series only full-time for 2 years. And then both times that we were full-time, we won the track championship. So there was a different scale of the way they ranked you back then. So you had national champion, state champion, and track champion. So I won my first year. I won the track championship.
Is that based on the number of races you compete in?
It's kind of hard, and I don't know if they still do it exactly the same. But when I was competing, so there was thousands of drivers that was running in this series. Well, if you were, this series was designed to be local NASCAR racing, grassroots racing. So if you were a family that lived in, Florida, and you had this car and you were competing in a series down there at a track down there, you're probably not going to make a trip up to Tennessee or Virginia or Kentucky to compete.
You just stay local.
So you just stay local, and then you have an opportunity to compete against us nationally just by your points. Your points was factored by how many cars showed up to the event.
I mean, that's very similar to like the K1 Speed we were just talking about. Probably. They have their own local tracks that you can race nationally, but they just keep your points on the races you enter.
Yeah. So the way they would figure it is they would base your points on how many cars showed up. So to get qualified for national points, your track had to meet a minimum of 18 cars per race. The track we were competing in was probably 25 to 30 every week, so we never had to worry about that. But you had to have like 18 cars competing in your division, and then there had to be there was a couple other things I can't remember, but in 2013 we won the track championship for Kingsport Speedway. We won the Tennessee State NASCAR championship, and we were, I think, maybe 7th or 8th overall in national standings. And that was probably somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000-ish plus drivers. So that was really neat. We got to go to the NASCAR awards banquet. That was my first time ever attending a banquet like that. Like they had 3 doors down there that played, and it was the coolest thing, man. Like, they treated us right. And I was like, wow, like this is cool. That was my first year. We go back 2014 and we basically pull a repeat. The only difference was in 2014, we, instead of finishing 9th in national points, we finished, I think, 5th. So we
did better that year.
Did a little better.
Yeah.
That year, we competed in a total of 36 events. And of those 36 events, we won 19 of them. So that was a huge year for us. And at the end of that year, that was 2 full-time seasons in the NASCAR Week 1 Series. Very tough, grueling schedule, very expensive. And at this point, you're still talking pretty much fully funded by...
I was about to say, is this still funded by mom and dad, or is this like sponsors here and there, mainly mom and dad? How does that play in? Because at some point in your racing career, money takes a hit where the average family, you just can't. It's impossible to do.
Yeah. So this point in a career, pretty much all the money still family funded. I had a couple sponsors that helped me. My largest being probably Texas Roadhouse. They wasn't on board corporately, but I had about 7 different franchise
just kind of
locations
private owners
that were pitching in. So it was help covering. But man, it was a lot. It was a lot. And we were to the end of our means. And so the end of that 2014 season, heading into 2015, my dad comes to me and he goes, probably not going to be able to compete full time again this year in this series. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I'm old enough at this point.
You understand what it takes to keep it going.
So it's like, okay, so what do we do? So we have a 3-4 month off season. We're kind of figuring out what to do early so we can get a game plan together. So first race of the year comes around in March and we go compete in it. And, I don't remember how we did. I think we won, but I don't remember for sure. But anyways, we didn't run many races in 2015. If I ran 10 races, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit. It was like, so previous year I ran 36, coming off of a championship. Next year I ran less than 10, and I was like, man. So what I didn't even touch on this, but I graduated high school in 2012. And so at this point, like, I've been working with my dad in the heating and air industry for a few years, but I had a schedule that allowed me to be able to work on a race car. So like I would work like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, be off Thursdays and Fridays if we had a race that week. If we didn't, I would work them. But so that was kind of my schedule. And so we would work on the race cars in this shop of the evenings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then full days, Thursday, Friday. And so that year rolled around, there was such a limited capacity in racing that like I still had to work, right? Like, so it was more work and less play. So the car pretty much just sat in here. We would kind of pick and choose which races we wanted to go to. And, Dad was like, I don't know really, because at this point you're talking about getting halfway through 2015. I'm like, what are we going to do for next year? It was the same story. Like, I don't know yet. We're not going to be able to keep going like this though, or we're going to go broke. So I got really lucky. And at the end of 2015 or close to it, I was at an autograph session for Food City. It was for the Food City Bristol night race. They held an event called Food City Family Race Night, like a day prior to the event. And we were on stage doing interviews and whatnot. Well, anyways, I ran across Eric McClure, who I had followed because he was somewhat local, being from Abington, Virginia. And I ran across him. We started talking. We became friends really quickly, had a lot of things in common. And he was just a good dude. And so, and this is where, like, you never know who you're meeting. And, like, when you say right place, right time, this is where this really shows through. So, later, at the end of 2015, like, he was running, Eric McClure was a NASCAR Xfinity driver and had been for years. And he come to me at the end of that 2015 season, and he was like, look, I'm thinking about stepping away from full-time driving. I don't want to be out of the sport, so I'm thinking about making my own team. He's like, it's just the brainstorming phases of this. He said, but here's kind of what I got in place. I'd be interested if you want to be my driver for a few races. He said, we're not going to compete full-time. We're just going to get our feet wet and do about 3 or 4 races. I said, yeah, let's do it. So I told my dad, and then Dad was like, hey, he was like, I'm all about you racing. It's just we can't keep funding.
Yeah.
So
if somebody else funds it, I'm all for it.
2016 rolls around, early 2016, like January, February. We got a game plan. Like, we're going to do this. So Eric buys a car, buys a motor, and he is. And for those of you that don't know, Eric McClure, his dad, Jerry McClure, and his family used to own Morgan McClure Racing, who the number 4 Kodak car in NASCAR, that was that family from Abington, Virginia, won multiple Daytona 500s.
I'm sure you guys get that a lot here.
Oh, yeah. All the time. Usually you get a little more than that, too. But, so he already had like a huge background in racing, and so they all pulled the trigger on it. I was the driver, and everything happened fast from like January to March. Like our race, I think it was March 16th was our race. It was a Bristol race. He was like, that's our first one. Okay, so we put all this together real quick.
And these are all the actual NASCAR tracks, the Coliseums, the Bristol Motor Speedways, the big tracks that everybody sees on TV.
And this is and then like team wise, you're full affiliation at this point. Like you have deep NASCAR history with the ownership of this team. You have personnel that's employed at the team that know tons and tons and tons about cars and racing. You're even though it's what is now called the ARCA series, it's big time. And so we show up to this event, and we had pretty good expectations. Like it was a high end effort. Like there was no used parts. They put out the A
good race
plus
car.
Most effort probably you could have done, and it showed because we won. And when we won on that stage, I mean, you're in front of NASCAR Cup Series owners, NASCAR Xfinity Series owners, truck owners, and that
eyeballs that can make a difference.
Exactly. And some of the names that competed in that race were current NASCAR drivers: Harrison Burton, Noah Gragson, Justin Haley. I could probably name a few more if I've seen an entry list, but there was tons of current NASCAR drivers in this race, and we won it. And we didn't just win, like we won this race. It was a 125 lap race, I believe it was, and we led 112 laps. Qualified 4th, and took the lead on lap 12 from an early restart, and never lost the lead the entire race. And to win as a new team, who had Eric McClure was never a team owner prior to this. I had never driven on the big stage really prior to this. And so coming out of the gate and then asserting your dominance like we did, it opened a lot of eyes. I got a lot of phone calls, a lot of media attention. That pivoted my career. And then that was 2016. Eric helped me make some contacts in the NASCAR Xfinity series the rest of that year. He wanted me to come back to drive for him in 2017, but he said, you need to go on and drive.
You need it basically full time.
You need to be full time. Yeah. And he helped me get that. So in 2017, I got affiliated with MBM Motorsports, owner Carl Long, in the NASCAR Xfinity series. I ran 7 races with him that year just to get our feet wet. And then I turned around, and 18 was my first full-time season, 2018. And 2018, man, from then on, I was full-time.
What's it like going for the history that you have from karting to now what's essentially NASCAR racing that people think about? What is now your Cup Series and Xfinity? They're right there between each other. What does that feel like as a driver having a career that long, and now you're essentially at the highest level?
Yeah, I mean, man, you can't put it into words. Like, from that first moment that we won that first race in go-karts, I was like, oh yeah, Dale Jr. better look out. Like that.
Now you have that opportunity.
That moment, right, as a kid. Then you fast forward to a early teenager, where we had won some big events, but really thought like the big events was going to get me my traction, but it didn't. And that was kind of a bummer. And then you have like back-to-back NASCAR Wheeling Championship titles, and then the next year you get hit with the information like, man, we're running out of money to help. You got to figure it out.
The highest point of your career, and it just kind of gut punches.
Yeah, so I'm like, dude, we're just coming off of back-to-back championships in NASCAR, and we're just gonna quit. So everything just absolutely lined out perfect. And when I got that shot, at Bristol, I had a 4-race deal with them that year. We ran Dover, New Hampshire, Iowa, and Bristol. We didn't win any of the other 3 events, but we ran well. But Bristol, man, showed like we can do it.
It's also a hometown track.
Yeah.
It's the closest track to here.
I know.
Yeah.
And their team was based out of Abington, Virginia. I'm Knoxville, Tennessee. Bristol right there on the line between Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol, Virginia. It was all eyes were on us, I felt like. And Eric had a really good mind for promoting and media, and he as a new team really came off the gate strong with just having the right components, the right media around us, and it got pushed to all the media outlets that we were doing this. And then when we won, it was like, okay, this might be legit. So that moment really set me up for where I'm at today and where I have been for the last many years.
And I think we met in 2018. I want to say is when we
It was
built
right after you got into
our
that
big
shop.
shop. Yeah, that was 2018. And then you got to a point either 19 or 20 or 20, I can't remember. And it was, we've already sponsored you once, and the next call you made for the following year was like, I got a chance to drive the Daytona 500 in the Cup Series, and I was like, it's a big opportunity for everybody. Like,
Yeah.
what is that like when you have this whole streak? You're not full time Xfinity, you are, but you're not. You kind of run the middle of the pack. Now you have a chance to race the Daytona 500 as a kid from Knoxville. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we got Trevor Bain. Everybody knows that
Yep,
story, but.
yep. So there ain't no feeling like it, man.
And that pause right there should show everybody. That's at least watching on the video is even now. You're part time now, but you have that can't be taken away from you.
Can't be taken away, and it's something that no matter what happens,
you made the highest level. You made one of the most famous races in the world.
And there's not a lot of words for that. I mean, that 2015 moment when you get hit with, all right, we might be done, to 2016 winning first race of the year, and then it was like highlight after that, full time in Xfinity in 18, and then I told you off camera before we started, but that year we didn't do anything spectacular in 2018. I was a rookie coming in. I was with a lower budgeted team, so we didn't have the means to win. The success that they had up to that point, you're probably talking about in a 40 car field. If you finish 25th, that's probably a win to that team. So just to put that into perspective, and
as far as a money and support standpoint,
and in that season, we had runs that were above 20th, and we had many runs that were 30th and back. And it was what I would consider to be a fairly average season, maybe a little above average. There's 33 races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in a full season, and we run from Valentine's to Thanksgiving. And I think we got maybe 2 weeks off total. Well, the last 3 or 4 events of that year, it was like a light switch had kicked on, and we couldn't finish worse than 16th. I mean, we were really good.
And that's a big jump because a lot of people don't realize that the guys like Joey Logano, Matt, or Kyle Busch, all of those guys, the backing that they have, and it goes back to the karting thing with the engineers. It's the same thing at another level.
And we don't even have that technology.
Wind tunnels and all that stuff.
Exactly. And they're putting in that kind of money at the karting level, and we don't even have those resources. I mean, they're out there, but our team...
They're talking about adjustments so fine where Logano just got penalized for a glove
that had
to stop the air just to stick his fingers out the window.
That's correct.
That's crazy.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. And we really ended 2018 strong. Like I said, it was an average, maybe an above average rookie season. And then like I don't know what my average finish was that year, but if I had to guess, I'd probably say 29th average finish.
Which the average fan is like, what's he excited about?
Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
But to put that in perspective, 25th was a win for the team I was competing for.
Yeah.
So pretty good season.
Fourth.
Yeah, I finished fourth.
Yeah.
And then like I said, like the last 3 races of that year, which was I don't remember, Phoenix, Texas, something. Anyway, ran really good. And like I said, I don't remember what our worst finish was. I don't even think we finished outside of the top 20 the last 3 races.
And a lot of these could be 0.5 of a second.
Yeah.
Like not that much of a time gap in a huge field like this.
And I felt more confident than ever as a driver. I felt like I was clicking on all cylinders with my team. So we go through that off season and like, we're like, all right, 2019's looking good. We brought back the same team. Me, ran it back. We come out of the gate strong in 2019. Very strong. The first probably 12 races of the year, I don't know that we finished worse than 25th. Like it got to the point where the standard at the team had changed from like we're winning at 25th to if we're not finishing at least 20th, we're depressed. So the whole standard had changed at the team. And 2019, that was all of 19. Really good year. There was downs. I mean, we had some downs, but overall, really good year. So we come off of that year. That winter, I get the call where it's like, okay, we're looking at going cup racing. We're going to go probably run the Daytona 500. We're going to do this, doing that. And I was like, all right, wow.
Yeah, let's do it.
I was like, so are we still doing Xfinity? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I'm doing both, Xfinity and Cup. So it was going to be career year for me. And I was looking at it from a standpoint of like, I am probably getting ready to position myself to be solidified
this
for
is your full time.
years
this
to
is what you
come.
wanna do.
Here we go.
What is that? Your first cup race, even the Daytona 500 is you're now on the track with people you grew up watching or
Oh yeah,
against.
most
Like,
definitely.
Jesus, that's Kyle Busch.
Well,
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm walking into the garage area on day one, and they have like media day, and you got to like get in your driver uniform and do some pictures and for Fox or NBC or whoever it was, and man, I mean, you're standing in a room and you got like Jimmy Johnson. I mean, you
NASCAR
got
championships
Kevin
all over
Harvick,
the place. Yeah.
Brad Keselowski, and you're like, hey man. And then they're like, what's up? And you're like, yes. So,
It brings you back to that,
Yeah.
that 70-year-old karting kid.
yeah, I come out of that media center and I'm like, hey dad, you know how you got that signature back in the day? Yeah, I shook his hand. So it was a cool moment. And I was getting ready to be pretty in what I thought to be, all right, we're green lights here. This is going to happen. So we go to Daytona, we do the deal, and we get through. So the way the NASCAR schedule worked at that point in time, we did Daytona, and then I think after Daytona, we immediately went to the West Coast, and we did like a rotation of what we call the West Coast Tour, which is like Vegas, or it was California, Vegas, Phoenix. So we do the first 3 races of the year, or the first 4 races of the year. Everything had went great to this point. Again, it was looking to be like a 1-up from 19, another career year. And then we're flying, like we're out in Phoenix, man. And I start getting like reports on my phone of like this COVID thing. And I'm like, what is coronavirus? What is COVID-19? Well, anyways, we fly back. I get home. The next week was going to be Atlanta. I was going to travel down on a Thursday. We had a practice on Friday, race on Saturday. And it's like that Monday hits and it's like, okay, well, we had an autograph session planned, but we're going to cancel it. Okay. Tuesday rolls around and it's like, okay, we're probably going to not have fans come to the track. Wednesday rolls around, NBA announces like, all right, we're done playing for the year. And then it's like, okay, the NBA announced they're closing down.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck? NASCAR's still ready. All right. So I hop in the truck. By this point, we're Thursday. We hop in the truck, go down. I sleep in the hotel. Friday morning, wake up, and it's like, okay, practice has been canceled. I'm like, Okay. So I go to the track. Dude, I don't much less. So I wake up and I get a text from my team. Practice has been canceled, but we're still racing. All right. So I get in the shower, get ready, leave the hotel. I go to the track to meet the team. I don't much less get to the track. And they're like, dude, the whole event's canceled. And I'm like, okay. So I'm kind of nervous. Like, this ain't never happened in my life. The world's shutting down. So
I think everybody at this point was kind of like, what the heck is going on?
So I'm nervous. I don't know what's going on. So we hop in the truck. We drive back from Atlanta. I get back in Knoxville. Everything's getting shut down, dude. And that was probably first or second week of March in 2020. And NASCAR is like, okay, we're done racing until further notice, which we ended up firing back up in May. I think it was May.
Well, at this point, you guys did like the iRacing series and all that stuff.
We had the iRacing, and that's where I never had a sim rig or iRacing before, but then to keep fans occupied and to put a little positivity out there during COVID, like NASCAR was like, if you have a sim rig, let's do sim racing, and we'd televise it and give some people some stuff to watch. Like, okay, so went out and bought me a sim rig and steering wheel and pedals. I didn't know what I was doing, and I sucked at it, but anyways, we did it, and so we go back racing in May, but there was no fans. There was no practice, no qualifying. You showed up to the track, you walked to your car, you raced, and you left. There was nothing.
And is that kind of how the running order went for the following race? Like whatever you finished in the race before, that was the running order for the next race?
I think it was something like that. Yeah. Either that or I think they may have set the field by points based on each week. If the points change, so it was like that all year. No fans, no practice, no nothing. All year, all of 2020. Okay, so because of the limited practice and stuff, what started out to be so good, 2019, start out of 2020.
It's kind of like those lower running teams need that.
We need the practice time, because we don't have the data.
You don't have the wind tunnel.
To
you don't
build
have the technology.
The cars to the data. So we get through the year. It ended up being kind of a bust. Like, we still ran good, but nothing to where the expectation was where I'd set. Yeah, man, I was thinking like, all right, we're gonna do great. So we hit off season, and now you're starting to get into the end of 2020, start of 2021, where you have a lot of, and everybody knows this, but that's where like the effects of the shutdown started taking place was 2021, and then
prices just
2022.
went.
So you had inflation, price spikes, people were price gouging.
Well, not even that, even like across country or across the world, stuff was still shut down. Like manufacturing was still shut down.
Manufacturing was an issue, getting product, inventory, everything. So 2021 rolls around, and like, here I am, this is my income. And, I've got, at the time, my wife was my fiance. We bought a house, and I'm sitting here like, this is our income, and what am I going to do? So I'm making phone calls all off season to team sponsors, and they're like, yeah, we're still good. So we go down to Daytona, we get through Daytona, we run like 2 or 3 races. And then it's like, the sponsors are like, I don't think we're going to be able to do a full year here. So I'm like, dang it.
And that's kind of just the food chain going down. Like, sponsors don't have the money to give.
It was a domino effect.
Their businesses were shut down, so they didn't have the revenue to be able to do that.
100%.
And we had that conversation when we sponsored it in 21 or 22. Yep. It was like, I think we did 5,000
I think the first race you sponsored at, I don't think you could even come to the track, could you?
No.
So it was still a shutdown.
Yeah.
So, I'm getting hit with this reality of like, man, this is my job. Like, and what am I going to do? So I run a part-time schedule that year. I think I competed in probably 12 to 15 events. And then the other events that I didn't compete in as a driver, the team was nice enough to let me come on the road and work for them, doing whatever I needed to do to maintain my income. So I was all right for 21. And then same story. 2022 rolls around. Things aren't much better, maybe in some areas worse. And then, like, long story short, never rebounded. Never was able to pick back up that main sponsor to carry the financial
and at the end of the day, racing comes down to finances. At that level, 100%. It's not possible for the average American family to do it. You need the sponsorship help.
Yes, and so 2022, I was part-time again. Not only, but this time I didn't necessarily go on the road every week with the team because it was a double-edged sword for me. But one reason was the team was getting to the point financially where they couldn't keep everybody at the same payroll because they were hurting too. Everybody was hurting, not just me, everybody. And so I was like, okay, so like we were legit part-time racing, part-time traveling, part-time income. And so that's when the whole like detailing story comes about. So
this is a recurring subject on this channel.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of my connections either come through professional sports or detailing, and that's just how it ends up usually.
Yeah. So at this point, like I've always loved cars. I've always been fascinated by like YouTube videos of like, man, I could just sit there and watch somebody buff a car on YouTube.
Fascinating videos of before and afters.
My wife gets mad because I'll fall asleep in the bed or on the couch watching a YouTube video of a buffer just but I love it. And so I had actually started detailing just for like friends and family, really as a starter in like, I think it was maybe 2017 or 18, but I only did like maybe 5 cars a year, maybe. And I think like my first ever detail, I charged like $80. I did a full interior shampoo, an engine bay, like a wheels
something
off.
not worth the $80.
Oh gosh, no. And so by the point, I think that was like 2018, and I just did it because when I got on the road full time, my rookie season, I wasn't making that much money, and I still needed, and I still had about 2 to 3 days free. And I was like, man, I could use these. And I'm not going to lie. At first, I was like, we're going to the lake. We're doing this. But then I was like, man, I need more money. So then that's where I started detailing like a car, one car every 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And I would only do it on pretty days or when I felt like it. But over the course of like that 3 or 4 year stretch, I built up a small customer base of maybe 30 to 40 people. And then in 2022, I'm faced with reality where like, okay,
you got to find another
something.
source of income.
Right. And my family at this point obviously still runs the A1 Finchum heating and cooling HVAC business. And I was like, man, do I go back to that? Do I not? What do I do? I still want to race. I don't really want to just default back to that. So I was like, let's see if we can make this work. So I just started detailing more and more frequently. And then it built up to what is now a very small business, but it is enough of an income to supplement the structure of my part-time racing schedule. And I love it. Like it's a cool, stress-free job. I'm sure yours isn't because you're much bigger. You have a lot more worries, but it is, I enjoy it. And so that's kind of where I'm at. We'll do 1 or 2 cars a week, sometimes just 1 a week. And there may be weeks where we don't do a car, and that's okay too. But it was never there to be full time, and I really,
and that's kind of
really don't want it to be.
That's kind of how ours transitioned. It was a hobby, and it just jobs kept getting closer and closer together, and a little bit more and more expensive before what I was making in detailing overtook our regular jobs.
Yes, yes, 100%. And like to me, racing's still priority. Like
if you've done that your whole life.
I'm when I'm looking at booking jobs, right? Let's say a customer calls me and so I got this car, I want you to buff and ceramic coat or whatever you want to do. Okay. Well, I can do it, on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
You got that same kind of with your dad's schedule. It was like Thursday, Friday, I need to either work on the race car or go racing.
If I get a phone call,
prep for the track.
So every year, it doesn't matter if I have a deal or not. I go through all the motions with NASCAR. I get my license. I go through my concussion tests. I go through all my drug tests. I make sure I get my credentials.
So you're ready for that phone call.
Where if I get a call, I can go. And I always leave the back end of my weeks, my Thursdays and my Fridays open. There are some weeks, if I know for a fact I'm not racing, I will book a job and do it. But I try and leave my Thursdays and Fridays absolutely open. And my goal is to get back into racing. Last year, 2023, I probably raced more in 2023 than I did in 2022. So it's kind of a small bounce back. I'm potentially looking at even more this year. So it's kind of trending back up. But
it's all about finding the sponsorships to make that entry.
The sad reality is I don't know that I'll ever see a full-time position racing again as a driver. And the only reason is because of the financial obligations that it takes. So in our sport, and very few people know this, mainly just industry people, but drivers are pretty much required to bring the sponsorship. I mean, teams have marketing departments.
You have to bring money to the table.
Yeah.
Like, it's a business at the end of the day.
Teams have marketing departments, and they push for sponsors, and they try their hardest to get them. But, like, it's a collective effort, and it takes all hands on deck. There are an exception of, like, your powerhouse teams, like your Hendrick, Gibbs, Penske,
they're always going to have that.
They're good to go.
Backing.
They're good to go. I'm not saying it's not a struggle for them, because I'm sure that grass is always greener on the other side.
Well, you got to think of it. It may not be a struggle. Like you're in the struggle to between that $50,000 to $100,000 range. Might be a struggle. They need to make $15 million.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like it's a different scale, but it's still similar.
So it's tough. So, man, I stay really busy all the time, because if I'm not detailing, I'm on the phone with a sponsor trying to get sponsorship geared up for a race. Vice versa. If I'm not doing that, I'm trying to detail, or I'm heading over here to do this or do that. And we do a couple charity events around, like with Food City. I've been doing stuff with them for years. And anytime they have like a pop-up event, I'll usually try and go and be a guest speaker, or, whatever. They did like a celebrity bagging a couple years ago. We went and did that. And so I try and still be as active as I can. And the goal is to go back full time. I mean, but there's a time limit on it. Like, you can't be.
Well, that's what we were saying at the beginning of the episode, is kind of like, you get into your 30s, you're getting old to be a race car driver.
Yeah. I mean, if I step in, when I step into my car right now in the NASCAR Xfinity series, when I started out in 2018, I was a youngster. I would say 80% of the field was older than me. Now, when I climb down in those race cars, I'm looking at the guy next to me like, are you old enough?
You get your high school test
do
next
this?
week? Or?
Yeah. And so it's like, I'm the old guy on the block, and I'm not the oldest in the series, but I'm probably in that top 10%, top 15% of the older drivers right now. And there's going to be, and I don't know when, and I don't know that there is a hard date for it, but there will be a time that comes to where it's like,
it'll be like, even if you brought the money, you're too old.
You're too old.
Like, people will tell you that. It's not necessarily you. It's people will tell you that.
One of the things that we have to do is what they call an impact test. I call it a concussion test because that's what it checks for. But it's a series of things that you have to go to, like neurology, and you have to do like speed and memory, and like if you fail that test, you ain't racing.
Yeah.
So maybe one day, if you slow down a little bit, because you have to.
Well, that's like you were saying before. If you're not in the car full time, you lose those natural reflexes.
Yeah, you lose an edge, like for sure. Like, I still feel like I could go out there and win a race, and I know I can.
You think if you drive down the interstate, I'm not saying do this, but you drive down the interstate at 100 miles an hour and then slow down to the speed limit, you feel like you're walking.
Exactly.
And if you don't do that all the time, that's 70 miles an hour feels really fast if you're not doing 100 every week.
Exactly.
And now you're at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's a big jump when you're so used to driving 70 everywhere.
It's a big jump. And something that is like different in our sport now is so through like the whole like 2020, 2021, 2022, NASCAR, like previous to those years, always had big practice sessions. So we would have like a whole day prior to the race where all we did was practice. And then when the pandemic happened and then we went back racing, there was no practice. They have now incorporated practice back in, but it's only 15, 20-minute sessions on race day, like just a few hours before the race.
Maybe 20 laps, depending on the track.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you factor in adjustments, coming down pit road, getting an adjustment and going back out and debating, with your team, what adjustments you want to make, you're looking at 3 runs, right? So you go out, you get your cold run in, fill the car out. What's it doing? So you come in pit road, and you're on the clock. So you got to be like, okay, it was a little tight. It was dragging a splitter, getting into one. Let's raise the track bar and let's put a packer in the right front. Okay, bam, make that adjustment, go out. Your second run, did it help it? Did it hurt it? You look at how it drove and your lap times. Make your information based on that. Come back in and you got one more shot at it. After that, practice is over. Impound the cars, get ready for the race, and that's all you got. That's it. And so it's tough because as a part-time driver right now, if I land a deal, go out here and source the money, bring it to a team, and we land a deal, I'm showing them to the track.
In a car you don't know.
Or with a team that I don't know potentially. And so, in sim racing is like, it helps, but I would say it's like 80% there. And I don't know that it can
You don't have the
closer.
G-forces and all that stuff, yeah.
No, it's 80% there. And it can only do so much. So when I land a deal, man, I've got to be on my game. And it's tough because you have that little bit of rust factor. You're just praying that everything goes right. You can't have anything go wrong. And so it's tough. And maybe there'll be a point where I will get back to be full-time, and hopefully sooner than later, because I don't want an expiration date to come around. But it is what it is. And so, you sit back and you look at it and you go, if racing doesn't really get much better, if I never get full-time, is detail in the way? I don't know. Is maybe trying to step back into the family business the way? Probably, but I don't know.
We even said at the end of the day, you do have those options available. It's not like it's now what do I do? I don't have anything to do. You do have those options.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so racing's still the priority. And as long as that's the priority, probably going to keep detailing and, doing a couple cars a week and leaving the Thursday, Fridays open in case I get that call.
Yeah.
And, when that reality sets in, whether that's a year from now or 5 years from now or whatever, there'll be a decision made. But right now, it's still 100% all in on racing.
Yeah, but at the end of it, like we said a minute ago, they can't take the Daytona 500 away from you. So you always have that. I
got to compete. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was probably close to 12 or 13 cup races in my career total. And my last cup race was 2021, I believe, somewhere in that ballpark. And that was every time you get in a cup car, man, that's a real,
tires are wider.
They're all the real deal, but that you don't get no higher. That's the ceiling. You hit the ceiling when you hit the cup car. So being able to say we ran 12 races in cup was pretty cool. You can't take that away, so I love it.
You still got that little kid mentality to be same driver's meeting as Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah. And, I can peacefully say that, if the racing career ended today, there's really no regrets. And everything was awesome, man. We had a good time, and I can say that, we made it. Like when I was a kid at 6, 7 years old, and I won that first race, and I slept in the back of that pickup truck with that trophy, and I made that statement Dale Jr. better look out. I somewhat made that.
You had that opportunity. Dale
Yeah.
Jr. might not have been racing at that time, but you had that level of opportunity to be able to say that you could do it.
Yeah. So it's a good story, and one day when I have kids or whatever happens with that, if they want to get into racing,
you're already prepared for.
And that's the other thing that I didn't even touch about in this story is I'm first generation racer.
Yeah.
Nobody in my family had ever done anything with racing. My dad had hot rods, but not racing. And that is very, very uncommon for any modern day racer.
To make it as high as you did and as the success you had along the way is very rare with no racing history.
Very rare. I don't know, what the percentages are, but it's very rare. A lot of your racers that are racing right now, your Chase Elliott's, Ryan Blaney's, they were generational racers.
They were brought up in the sport.
Exactly. And so it is very unique to see a non-generational racer break through what I'm going to call the barrier.
Do all this.
Yeah.
Is essentially what you're trying to say. Is everything behind you, that's your story, and that's all you. That's not your family trophies. That's what you've done in your career.
So it's very, rewarding, and the memories that I was able to build with, like the friends that I met along the way in racing are lifelong friends to this day and will be forever. Like, you're not going to take that away. You're not going to take the time that I got to spend with my family. Like, man, that right there, even if we hadn't have won a single trophy, like that right there is worth it all, So it was really cool.
Well, we're kind of over our time limit that we had by a little bit, but we appreciate you taking the time and letting us come into the shop. I know we had a little equipment difficulty setting up before we started this, but we appreciate the story, and I'm sure it'll kind of give a little more of a dive into the background of racing versus just watching it on TV. It'll kind of give people an idea of what it really takes and the commitment to the sport, and financially and mentally.
Yeah, it's a lot, and my parents are still always actively involved in my racing, but in my adult life, like it's so challenging to be able to race and balance a business, and so you gotta cherish like right now, if we get to, I would say over the last couple of years, I've averaged anywhere between like maybe 4 races and 6 to 8 races a year, and every time you strap into a car, you're like, this could be the last time.
The last one, yep.
And you soak up every moment. You soak up,
and it goes by so fast.
So you soak up the good and the bad, because 10 years down the road, they're all good.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time and coming out. We'll see you guys next week, Monday at 12 p.m. I haven't announced the guests, but we appreciate Chad spending the time today.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
You guys have a good one. As we close this chapter, I encourage you to keep climbing, keep pushing beyond your limits, and keep believing in your ability to overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way. Until next time, keep striving, keep reaching, and keep climbing the ladder to success. We'll see you next week.